What if we changed our relationship with food? Please welcome Jessie.
When you were young, what terrified you most? I'll go first. Growing up, I had three main fears. First, being kidnapped. My brother and I, we used to duck and curl like shrimp in the car anytime we would see large pickup trucks go by. Completely normal behavior, according to all psychologists. My second fear, seagulls. We always had more seagulls than children at my elementary school. And third, anything and everything that had sugar and was edible. My name is Jessie Chang, and I am so happy to be here today to talk about a topic that I believe impacts us all. 3 months ago, I published my first novel called Unglamored, which speaks about eating disorders within the entertainment industry as well as Asian communities. But I asked myself afterwards, now what? Eating disorders are still the deadliest mental illness in the world. One person dies at the director's office room every 52 minutes. So I asked myself, now what? Eating disorders are such a serious issue, and they can often feel like an all-consuming problem, especially with the million messages we hear every day that feed our struggles. But I believe we can help address eating disorders by first understanding what they are, and then understanding how the food advertising industry strategizes against us so we can better educate ourselves and the future to come. So, what exactly are eating disorders? Eating disorders are complex mental illnesses characterized by abnormal behaviors in your behaviors, thoughts, and attitudes on food, eating, body weight, and body shape. And because they are mental illnesses, they do not discriminate based on our race, or our age, our gender, our social status, or even our body shape and our body size. I personally struggled with disordered eating and a binge eating disorder for over 7 years. But I can promise you that my years of struggle had nothing to do with my lack of self-control and discipline. If anything, my eating disorder flourished due to my ability to self-deny, to restrict, and to control. Like many of us, I grew up believing that I was a better person and more likable when I was skinny and ate diet foods, and feeling quite guilty if I did the exact opposite. Now, if we look at this photo of me on the slide, this does not look like a kid who grew up fearing sweets. But I actually had a very toxic, unhealthy relationship with food growing up. I was naturally chubbier, so the kids at school would tease me for having a larger appetite. My parents warned me that I would become overweight if I had dessert, or that I would never get married or be respected by a man if I were fat. Now, these are messages that we constantly hear. And I was always rewarded with dessert, only if I did terrible things like practice the piano or do 3rd grade math in the 1st grade. I know, some of us can relate. So many of us, these are the kinds of experiences that we constantly hear. So Thanksgiving felt like a test. Birthdays felt like a trial. Snack sections were a temptation. And classroom parties were the best way to score 0 in self-control and discipline. I believe that a lot of these messages and experiences I just described are ones that many of us can relate to, which shows us something. Somehow, the fear of weight gain or seeming undisciplined with food choices is something we learn as children. It is so deeply ingrained within us that children tease other children for being in large bodies, and it is almost instinctual to feel proud for eating low-carb meals and quite guilty for eating high-calorie meals. The fact that the diet and weight loss industry here in America has grown to be a $71 billion industry is testament enough to how this pursuit of thinness is a collective, nationwide one. But as this troubling reality is going on, there is an entire industry that sees this as an incredible opportunity for profit. Food advertising. The truth is, if you ever felt guilty for snacking even though you're hungry, felt bad for finishing a bag of chips, judged someone for choosing a cookie over an apple, chances are that your resulting emotions were highly influenced by ads you've seen in our culture's glorification and obsession with thinness. Right? And now, these are experiences, of course, that a lot of us can constantly relate to. Many of us understand this pressure to have the perfect celebrity body. So for women, that stereotypically means having a thigh gap, a thin waist, a flat stomach, being thin yet still having the curves in the right place. And for men, that stereotypically means being essentially fat-free, being extremely lean, and yet still being big and strong-looking and manly. Now, you guys may have just realized that these ideal body types are innately contradictory. But food ads imply that we can achieve these enviable bodies if we just eat perfectly. But I'll break it to you. Most of us will never be able to sustain such a body shape and size. The industry is aware of this too. But the fact that the standard of fitness is genetically unattainable for most people is precisely what makes it such an effective marketing tool. Food ads imply that we are weak if we give in to our appetites. At the same time, they package foods as guilt-free and diet-friendly to send another message, that we are morally better if we choose these healthier options. So yes, the way we advertise food is contributing to the deadliest mental illness in the world. But what if we transform the narrative we're having around food? And what if that starts with the way advertisers market food and the way that we, as consumers, respond? I'm a marketing student here at Boston College, and it's been fascinating learning about how marketers drive up profit and create loyal customers by influencing their psychology. But more than fascination, there is also a horrifying component to marketing that preys on consumer insecurities and cultural obsessions. Now, you'll learn about this whole idea of subliminal messaging, which is the idea that we will subconsciously influence consumers' decisions and beliefs. This can often look like presenting the idea that X product will make our lives more attractive, or presenting certain ideas, images, and words that unearth desires we didn't even realize we had. Now, this strategy is extremely effective, but for those of you who are already worried business people, I hear you. It sounds like some terrifying ritual used to possess us. Now, why don't we look at this ad that Snack Factory did a few years ago with their well-known brand, Pretzel Chips. In order to sell this brand, they had two main taglines. You can never be too thin, and taste as good as skinny feels, which you may recognize is from Kate Moss's controversial phrase, nothing tastes as good as being skinny feels. Now, thankfully, the public called out Snack Factory for this, and you might be even a little bit skeptical because this is the opposite of subtle. But I'd argue that food ads have evolved, and they become sneakier and sneakier over time. Here are some other examples of brands that we all may recognize. Woo, Katy Perry. And though these ads are much more subtle, they still use the same tactic of using guilt and shame surrounding food as effective marketing tools. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. Hey, Jesse, we're struggling with obesity here in America. Isn't it good that food ads promote self-control? Won't consumers thank us for it? I hear you, trust me, but we marketers are smart and perfectly aware of this too. I want to introduce you to an idea that Boston College professor Charlene Hesbiber calls the cultural paradox in her book, The Cult of Thinness. Essentially, our food ads are very much aware that our culture values thinness. So they appear to offer us a win-win solution by offering us free access to eating and snacking, but without the guilt. They do this by packaging foods as guilt-free and diet-friendly, waste-friendly. But in reality, there should have never been guilt associated with eating in the first place. We are told that the less we eat, the more self-controlled we are. Yet at the same time, more and more addictive ingredients are being added into foods. We are being bombarded with increasingly glamorized images of highly processed foods. So it is under the guise of helping people become more healthy, thinner, that they are promoting more snacking, more eating than ever before. Because remember, they want us to eat more. It drives up their profits. And they add ingredients we can't even pronounce anymore to make us want more of it. Therefore, the cultural paradox means that the demand for diet and junk foods occurs at the same time, resulting in a situation where we Americans are becoming increasingly obese, but within a culture of thinness. So if we think that food ads are doing us a favor by trying to fight obesity, we have to think again. The way to achieve good health isn't to make people hate their bodies and ruminate endlessly on food decisions. We can stop allowing these manipulative food ads to perpetrate the feelings of guilt and shame that have been transformed into weapons used against us. So I ask myself, and all of us sitting here today, now what? If you're a marketer like me, let's begin with reevaluating the way we are promoting messages to consumers. We have to look beyond just maximizing shareholder value and profit, because we're impacting a whole generation of people and their attitudes towards food. But what about us? What about us as the consumers? What are we to do? My hope is for us to become more aware of the way food ads are impacting our psychology, and I challenge us to think beyond, to actually reject the external messages we hear, and to really tune in internally, to listen to our bodies and what their individual bodily needs are so that we can properly nourish and satisfy them. So the next time we're shopping and we feel a little bit guilty, we're eating and we feel stressed about this because it's a high calorie and we've been told that carbs are bad, I challenge you to ask these questions to yourself. First, why do I feel guilty for eating this? Is there fear attached to food? Second, am I hungry? Am I full? What is my body telling me right now? And third, and lastly, what is the worst thing that could happen if I allow myself to fuel my body with the food it wants and needs? Because you see, this change on our end, on the consumer's end, needs to begin with our daily perspective on food and as well as our interactions with people. If you have children or work with younger children, I hope that we will cease using sweets as a way to compensate children for good work and to punish them by restricting it from them. Food ads market sweets as the perfect guilty pleasure or an incentive for desirable behavior, but this can have extremely negative impacts on children. It is very, very normal for them to crave sweets, and we can encourage them to eat them moderately in a way that still honors and respects their bodies. But it is actually when they feel like a scarce, hard-to-earn reward that they become a source of guilt, shame, anxiety, and temptation. And for us college students, this pressure to have the perfect body is immense, especially on this campus. But we need not compare our bodies to one another or evaluate our moral goodness based on what we eat. Every body is built differently and needs to be nourished differently as well. We don't have to choose eggs over bagels because we've been taught that carbs are bad, or buy the keto version of a dessert even though we hate the taste of it. Even the way that we talk about food, avoiding statements such as, I can't believe I ate XYZ, or I can eat this because it's a guilt-free version, can drastically help those around you who may be secretly struggling with eating disorders. And for the future world we are creating, I ask, now what? I know we can create a world where elementary school me could have enjoyed larger meals without worrying about what other kids at school would say. And I know we can create a world where every child learns to enjoy food for the joy it brings rather than the guilt they are taught to feel. I know we can create a world where every child, every parent, every relative, every professor, every student is aware of the way that food ads are affecting us. And for us marketers, it is such a privilege to be one, but it is also a huge responsibility. So I challenge us to think about the way that we are impacting them, even if it makes doing business harder. Because striving for business goals should never be done at the expense of people. And lastly, I know we can create a world where we keep marketers accountable for the way that they are influencing us. We can pay attention to the messages we hear and see, choose to challenge them, and do our best to reclaim the authority we've lost for so long. Not only that, to reject unhealthy messages to pursue a truly healthy and peaceful relationship with our bodies. So let's start a revolution by changing the narrative we're having around food. And let's create this possible world where we cherish food for what it is and promote a truly healthy generation, body and mind. Thank you.